Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. As I always say, I don't know who's going to join me on this Saturday morning. I was starting these at 9:30, and that was to go to a yoga class at 12. That was to ensure that I would get to that yoga class at 12. But I'm not going to any yoga classes today. As a matter of fact, I think I might just relax today, because it was my 5-day in the office week, and after that, there needs to be 1 day of recuperation, and with just a 2-day weekend, there needs to be 1 day to recuperate. Muno Kokuyo. Oh, I see the os. So I think I know who this is. Is this the nameless protagonist? Under a different name? Because the nameless protagonist is the one who usually says os. But if not, if you are someone else, welcome. All right. So Dr. Orion Taraban just dropped a video recently called "Give Him the Money." See, I knew it. I knew it was you, dude. I've been thinking. I've used your poetic voice in my intro for the last half of year here, and I was thinking, me and Nameless, we need to link back up. So, I will be reaching out to you soon. And speaking of which, this Nameless is the one who really made us aware of the mouse utopia experiments. Let me see if I have a still shot of Mr. Calhoun and his mice. And this is arguably what's playing out right now. So I think this is very much in line with Nameless's this is very much in line with Nameless's gospel. Let's see if I have a picture here. Hopefully it is alphabetized properly. Okay, it's loading. We're loading. For those out there in viewer land, please smash that like button. If you're new, please consider subscribing, no matter how long you stay. Yeah, so Nameless turned us all onto this. And this is arguably what's happening right now. And I think Dr. Taraban's video and this paper from Denmark, I don't know if they intended to relate themselves to this, but in my mind, they seem to be related. All right, I will play the intro, and then I'll come back and give a few introductory points, and then we'll see what Dr. Taraban has to say about gender and resources, and what each gender chooses to do with resources, and why. So I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I think this is the significance of when you say the technology is running so far out ahead of the biology, right? Because it's almost shattering that part of our natural programming.
So what's going on, what that really talks to is the reason why it's done that way is our systems operate on a seniority-based modality. So the older the particular system we've adopted, the more powerful that neurological pathway and impulse. That's why these studies are critical. Everything in our biology is predicated on these kinds of principles. The reasons why we were able to evolve as a group, because there were certain things that we were able to lean on from the group aggregate existence that allows for us to do things as individuals that are defined as healthy. And when you begin to do wholesale swapping out on a 1-for-1 of social modality versus technological introduction, then you begin to atrophy a lot of these things and you start having deficiencies in ways you had no idea, or you get unintended emergent behavior, as we're seeing with the behavioral sinks, for example. It's all connected to social roles, in my subjective opinion.
Welcome to Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. Science and technology stories are all around us, and there are always science and technology stories to tell. There are always science and technology stories to tell. Everybody, if this camera, if it flickers during the stream, it's been doing that recently. I don't know why that is. I don't know if I need to get a new one. But please bear with me. It hasn't interrupted the entire quality of streams since then. I know Nameless, he's probably heard this ad nauseum, but his voice is so poetic. And so a lot of people have made complimentary remarks on his voice. That's the best way I could say it. All right. So gender and resources. I'll start this by saying that a couple of years ago, this channel is I do a lot of science journalism here. I guess you could call it that. Science, current events, science journalism, and talking about things that the mainstream news and the mainstream media doesn't cover, probably intentionally. Okay. And a couple of years ago, someone asked, why is Dr. Dunbar covering egg freezing? Why is he covering the freezing of eggs? Well, oops, not do that. Let me start that over. A couple of years ago, someone asked me, why is Dr. Dunbar covering egg freezing? Why is he covering the freezing of eggs? What does he care about that? Well, that is a science current event, and that is a very relevant topic today because it folds into the future of our country, the future of Western countries, and just in general, the future of humanity itself. Are there going to be more people in the future? If so, how many will there be? What will the future of humanity look like? Because people, one gender in particular, is making different decisions on reproductive biology. Okay, so that's why I covered egg freezing, and when you start talking about egg freezing and female fertility windows, there's always the need to, when you have gender discussions, there's a need to level set everything and say, okay, well, men have to deal with this too. So then sometimes you have the counter argument that men should freeze their sperm. Okay, and men have a wall. Okay, so you hear all kinds of things, but I think the consensus is that women have a set number of eggs and a set fertility window, and there's an optimal time to use those eggs in that window. And we've seen men of very advanced ages reproduce. So the news we get, the information we get is oftentimes very, very targeted. It's very slanted, and it's very, very it's not always accurate with the real world. It's there to shape thought, shape sentiment, and in many instances to shape behavior. So behavior, we're going to come back to that in 1 second. A quick announcement, a quick side note from this week. As a part of my personal health journey, I started recording my diet on my smartphone again using MyFitnessPal. Okay, and I'm looking at my calorie count and my water intake and my nutrients, my macronutrients, my micronutrients. And just as an aside, as an intro, because we went over this in undergrad, saturated fat versus trans fat. Okay, and MyFitnessPal is cool because it gives you a readout. Once you put the data in, once you put in what you ate, it will tell you. It'll break down your cholesterol, your triglycerides, your sodium, your protein. And just briefly, for those who don't know, and I don't have it queued up here. I don't know why I didn't have it queued up. I think it's at the bottom here. I thought I called it types of fat. Maybe it's kinds of fat. Well, let me just look up fats. I know I made the slide here. Okay, give me one moment here. I've got so many pictures in here. Okay, olive oil, lactic acid. I have this nice, pretty diagram I want to show the audience, and I can't find it now. You guys keep letting me know what you think there in the chat. I see a few comments have shown up while I'm looking for this picture, this pretty picture that I just pulled off of Google. Triglycerides, urine. How about that? See, I want to do it now because I'll forget by the end of the show once Taraban gets done talking. Okay, let me read some of your comments here. I'm going to fix this. Tony, good morning. He says, good morning, Dr. Thunder. Is Dr. Thunder here? I didn't see Dr. Thunder come in. 1 second here. And then we will get on with the show. Just bear with me one moment. See, Tony, you said that was a mistake. I get all the doctors mixed up. All right. All right, come on, PowerPoint. Come on. I apologize for all the dead space. This is bad for a live stream. And most of you probably know this already. All right, Tony, we're all dusty docs, as Dr. Thunder says. Let's see, what time is it? 16 minutes. All right, now it should be sitting right there for me. And there it is. All right, the kinds of fats. All right, so you have saturated fat and unsaturated fat. There's trans and cis. The saturated fat comes mostly from animals, animal protein. Okay, burgers, fish, hot dogs, whatever your pleasure is, chicken. And it's there's no double bond right there in the middle. So if you look at the unsaturated fat, you have a double bond right there in the middle. Unsaturated fats are usually plant-based fats, and the big difference is saturated fats are solids at room temperature, okay, because they don't have that double bond, okay. And the unsaturated fats, those tend to be liquids at room temperature, okay, and those are better for you, okay. And the reason this is important is because when I was looking at my Fitness Pal, I my consumption of I snack on nuts throughout the day, and those are high in unsaturated, heart healthy fats. They're rich in alpha linoleic acid, alpha linoleic acid, and I think beta oleic acid. They're high in the low density lipoprotein lowering fats. So I was looking at my app on Thursday night, and I noticed that I went over the allotted totals for unsaturated fats, and you know it adds up your total. So you go over for all these fats, and you're like, oh my god, I'm killing myself. But then when I looked at the breakdown and the unsaturated fats, and I was thinking about what I was eating, I was thinking, okay, that's okay. That's not so bad because I'm not eating steaks all day. I'm eating heart healthy nuts. So saturated fat versus unsaturated fat, and the trans fat is the oil that McDonald's and Five Guys and Burger King they use to fry up their goodies because those are heat resistant and they could use them over and over and over again. The trans fats, but those are also not good for us long term. Okay, so there's a quick crash course on the types of fats and what's good for you and what's not. Okay, let's get on with the feature presentation here because I took too long to find the slide. All right, Dr. Orion Taraban, he is the I botched his title on my writer's channel. But Dr. Orion Taraban is a clinical psychologist. So there it is. He's a clinical psychologist. He runs the channel Psych Hacks. He wrote this good book, The Value of Others, which was written for men and women. For the people who are going to accuse me of misogyny, it was written for men and women. He runs a very good channel. Master Teacher BGS he remarked recently that he's our favorite Caucasian. That's how my dad would say it. I don't want to say what he really says. But and he makes videos on philosophy, life, relationships almost daily. So he just dropped a video called "Give Him the Money." Women don't share. Okay, it's a provocative title, but it's saying something very, very profound. Something that I think everybody is starting to realize now. And something I've pondered personally. Okay. Before I show the video, because to me this is in part a behavioral biology story, a behavioral biology story. All right. That's a section of biology. So let's take a quick look at what behavioral biology is. And this is just a quick Google AI question. Behavioral biology. Behavioral biology is the scientific study of the biological and evolutionary bases of animal and human behavior, examining how actions are influenced by genetics, hormones, the brain, and environmental stimuli. It bridges psychology, biology, and neuroscience to understand how organisms interact with their environment. Behavioral biology, the environment, our genetics, the environment, external stimuli, how all of those things work together. Okay, I'm seeing, as a scientist myself, I'm seeing this as that kind of a story. And so a lot of people, when they see things unfolding around them, they don't consider the environment. They don't consider the external stimuli. They assume the behavior or the behaviors should go on the way that they've always gone on, and that they should be the way that they've always been. But what happens when you change the environment and when you change the circumstances? Are you going to get the same things you've always gotten? Usually the answer is no. Let me read that again, and then we'll watch the video. Cynical Optimist, thank you for stopping in. The nameless protagonist beat you in this morning. He says, salute Dr. Dunbar. And he says, and salute to the gentleman in the chat. Okay. Behavioral biology. Behavioral biology is the scientific study of the biological and evolutionary bases of animal and human behavior, examining how actions are influenced by genetics, hormones, the brain, and environmental stimuli. It bridges psychology, biology, and neuroscience to understand how organisms interact with their environment. What's something we hear here in the YouTube streets, on certain channels in particular? You change the environment, you change the behavior. Okay. 23 minutes, 24 minutes. So this is a slide showing ecology. And there's some zoology here as well. So this is all studying how communities live together, how certain species reproduce, how certain species keep each other in check in terms of population. Humans, and this is assuming a natural environment here, but humans, we have essentially until a meteor comes and strikes the earth, humans have conquered the earth. We have cities, we have technologies, now we have the internet, now we have AI, we have agriculture. So we've created a very, very comfortable habitat for ourselves. There's no natural predator for us. And the Mouse Utopia experiments, shout out to Nameless. And since Nameless is here, when I finish up, if you're still here, I'll probably drop the link so you can come up and give us your words. But Nameless brought this to our collective consciousnesses when An environment is created that's so comfortable. Behavior changes, reproductive biology changes, populations change. Okay, so I think these things are all rolled into this video that we're about to watch. So with that, let me cue the video up, and let's go. And keep in mind, just like years ago when I started covering freezing eggs, there are a lot of boomer parents, the ones that are left, are looking around and wondering why they don't have any grandchildren. Okay, some of the answers have been right in front of us, hiding in plain sight. But it's to acknowledge them. It's hard to acknowledge them for some people, and also now the whole governments are looking at this, because governments and tax systems and social systems, social safety net systems, those are all predicated on having more people at the bottom, younger people, paying into a system to take care of the older people. Okay, so if the people run out, this entire construct we live in is going to start to look very, very different. All right, Dr. Orion Taraban. And I was so busy this week doing all my stuff, I saw this come up, but I didn't have a chance to watch it until someone said, hey.
I'm Dr. Orion Taraban.
Whoops. Until someone said he said something very, very critical in this video. So you need to go watch it. Fair use.
I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is Psych Hacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is Give Him the Money. So this is a real important episode. It's based on a study by Jacobsen, Jorgensen, and Lowe that just came out of Denmark. And I have to talk about it because, I'm sorry, I just can't resist the chance to feel vindicated. Listen close, as it's going to explain a lot about the world. So this study was not a survey. It did not poll men and women's attitudes or intentions or beliefs or any of that nonsense. It was a longitudinal study using epidemiological data.
So in my 9 to 5, let me supersize myself briefly. In my 9 to 5, we do deal with some epidemiology. So when he said it was a longitudinal study, I knew what that meant. Just briefly, that meant that they tracked the data for a window of time. So I think it was I have the study here. They tracked the data for about 10 years. So that's long and that's very laborious. And I imagine calculating that data, making sense of that data, that probably took a lot of time. But that's basically what it means in terms of a longitudinal study, that there are also cross-sectional studies, but they tracked a specific window of time. All right. For the non-epidemiologists out there.
Like actual objective variables at the population level. And not just some of the population, not just most of the population, but the entire Danish population from 2004 through 2018.
See that right there? That's 2004. So the study went for 14 years. That's a long study. At least right here, right now in my mind, that's a long study. All right. And this study is based out of Denmark.
Oh, like this is the kind of sample that researchers fantasize about. And when we live in an age when it has literally never been easier to do this type of research, the publication industry's continued focus on increasingly outre subsets and unverifiable constructs is, frankly, damning and irresponsible. In any case, this is like God-level validity for a study, and its findings are very robust and very significant. And what did that study find? Very simply, the analysis revealed that when men received a permanent pay increase, they were more likely to have children relative to the population baseline. However, when women received the same increase, they were not just less likely to have children, they were significantly less likely to have children.
I have that data pulled up here. We'll take a quick look at the graph once this is done. But I've pondered this for a while. In my experience, it seems to me that these jobs, these degrees, this education, they mean something different for both genders. Okay. They mean something different for both genders. So I think the assumption was that just as he's asserting, ladies would take their degrees and their education and they would use it for family formation the way that men have traditionally have. I think that assumption was made by previous generations, but now we're starting to see that, those degrees, those money, those resources, they shouldn't necessarily be used for those purposes. Okay. All right. By that side of the gender line. Reproductive biology and resources.
And we're not even talking about a big increase in pay here. The study revealed the effects of a 5% permanent income increase. And with just this little increase, men were 1% more likely to have children, and women were 4% less likely to have children. And my hunch, though this wasn't in the study, is that this effect only increases, though probably not linearly, as the permanent income raise increases as well. Furthermore, and very significantly, this effect was most pronounced in men and women under 30. That is, during women's peak fertility window. The two graphs kind of level off after 40, but the men remained consistently positive throughout their lifespan. That is, more money was always related to more kids in men, while the women remain consistently negative across the same timeline. That is, more money was always related to fewer kids in women.
You know, guys, I think I'm going to show that graph right now. I think it's appropriate to show it right now, just so we could see what he's talking about. This is I just pulled this paper, I think Thursday, so I haven't had a chance to read it. But as a scientist myself, I scrolled through to find the particular graph that I thought he was talking about, and I will commit to reading the paper itself in its entirety when time allows. So this is the figure that he's talking about there. So you could see, let me blow this up for you guys. Yeah. So you could see there the panel on your left, that is less skilled workers. Panel A, panel B is highly skilled workers. So your x-axis for the less skilled workers, that's age, so 25 to 55. And your y-axis is number of children percent change from the baseline. So you could see that for the men, that's a 5% increase for men. That's the blue dashed line. There's a little bump there, a 1.2% bump, starting at age 25 and then 30, and then it levels off to 0.3. And this red line, the wage increase for women results in a negative 3.8%. Okay, at age 30, and then it levels off to minus 1.1%. So long story short, with this pay increase, the women are less likely to have children here. Okay, now for the highly skilled, so these are white collar people. These are college educated white collar people. So for the men, there's a slightly less increase, a slightly less likelihood for them to have children there. So 0.5% versus 1.2%, but it still levels off to 0.2% going off to age 55. But for the women, there's a sharper decrease with this white collar education. So they're down here to minus 4.1%. And then as the ages go on, it's about the same, 0.8, minus 0.8, minus 1.1. As a scientist, those numbers are about the same. So there's something about resources between the two genders giving rise to a different behavioral result. Okay, let's go back to the video. Tony says, so when men get money, their first instinct is to provide for others. It's to start a family. Okay. But on my channels, I've covered Men Without Work by Nicholas Eberstadt. He's been talking about this. He's been talking about the unworking men falling out of society. But he's also been talking about the birth rate crisis. And one of the things he says is that for all the benefits that children create, they are quote unquote inconvenient. Okay. So if you think about a woman has to carry a baby 9 months to term, and she's the one biologically charged with nursing it in its early age, she has the option of doing that. Okay. And she has the option of traveling, going to expensive dinners, going to Miami, getting her nails done, getting luxury cars. There we are. All right, let's go back. It creates quite a conundrum.
Holy shit. Now, if I seem surprised, it's because I am. I'm not surprised by the results of the study. I'm surprised by how perfectly this study substantiates so much of my theory. Let's get to it. Those who have read my book, The Value of Others, and those who haven't should get their hands on a copy like right away, will know that one of my fundamental premises is that people enter into relationships to exchange unequal goods of comparable value. And when it comes to sexual relationships, these resources typically include the resources of men and the sexual opportunity of women. When that can't or won't happen for whatever reason, no relationship occurs. Anyone who disagrees with this needs to pause and look around. Like, do you see any relationships where the woman is with a man who has nothing to offer, and or the man is with a woman he doesn't want to have sex with? No? Huh. It's fascinating. The people who choose to continue to get upset by this remain baffling to me.
Nameless protagonist, thank you for mentioning this. as the master teacher did yesterday. He's talking about Bree-Falt's law. Yep, Bree-Falt's law. When the woman no longer sees any value in the relationship, that relationship will dissolve. Okay, which I think is consistent with what we see in the human population. Okay, in terms of who typically leaves first, and the need for a man to provide value. Bree-Falt's law. So many of these things we should have been taught when we were younger. I think we should have been. This should be in the curriculum, and to not put these things in the curriculum somewhere, I think is it was criminal. If these things were out there, these things should have been taught to us when we were younger. Very useful. If anyone wants to make a donation, let me slow down. If anyone wants to make a donation to the channel, that information is there in the ticker. I'm not monetized over here.
But let's get back to this study. Whether it's cultural or biological, it's probably a bit of both, and we don't have to split hairs over the ratio here. Men are programmed to be protector providers, and women overwhelmingly agree with this. Like everything a real man is supposed to do redounds to the benefit of women, never to himself. And there's no reason to be surprised by this. Since women are the gatekeepers of sex, they've run an informal eugenics program for millennia, selecting the men who best expressed those attributes over the men who didn't, which is how this behavior came to be biologically encoded in men.
All right. He's going to pump his content there in a second. Just saying that when he said women have run an informal eugenics program for centuries, what that means is, and you will get tarred and feathered for saying this, but it's the women who decide whose genes go on into the future. Okay, when you're having the and for your own sanity, I recommend that you don't. When you have the abortion discussion, okay, invariably it's going to go to he needs to be more cautious with his seed. He needs to be more selective with his seed. He needs to be more careful with his seed. But that being said, at the end of the day, it's still her choice. Especially in today with what 30 forms of birth control, it's still her choice as to what happens to that fetus. Okay. And then superseding that, who she does the dance with, that's her choice as well, unless said man forcibly does something. But in my mind, there are two choices there, and I might get tarred and feathered for saying that, but so be it. It is what it is. Let's go back. Fair use. An informal eugenics program. That's not popular to say.
Are you finally ready to understand how relationships really work? Then get your hands on my book, The Value of Others.
I have this book. I'm a self-published author, so I'm going to let him rock for this 1 minute. It's just 1 minute. I'm going to let him do his advertising he created this excellent video for us.
How to get and keep more of what you want in the sexual marketplace. Learn what actually moves the needle, why relationships fail, and how to position yourself for success in this strange new world of mating and dating. Over 100,000 copies sold. Get yours today. Now available in ebook, audiobook, and paperback formats. The links are in the description. Now, a big reason why birth rates are down is not because people watch too much TikTok or that they don't value love or they haven't found Jesus or whatever people are saying these days. They're down because of simple economics. The average 25-year-old guy living in a Western city has a 10 by 10 room in an overpriced apartment he shares with two other guys, a $40,000 a year salary, maybe, and 30 grand of debt. He's looking at his situation and he is correctly thinking, how can I bring another human being into the world? I need to earn more money and make something of myself before I think of starting a family, which is entirely responsible. And when, through the intensity and consistency of his efforts, he does manage to earn more money and make something of himself, he doesn't go out and buy a Ferrari. He doesn't blow it on hookers and coke. He doesn't fly himself first class to a boys' weekend in Miami. Like a few guys might do that, but not the majority of men. Rather, the vast majority of men decide once they arrive in life materially that it's time to start a family. And this isn't just me saying this, like this is literally the first line in the most famous feminist novel ever written. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Jane fucking Austen.
So shout out to Theo Waff. Theo Waff, if you watch my my recent interview with Theo Waff about cloud engineering, that this was one of Theo's main motivations for focusing on teaching Black men, because he asserted that the Black men are more likely to take their winnings and start families, while as the opposite is true for our the fairer sex. So
what's my point? Simple. Men share. Men share. The vast majority of men share. When they do well, they spread it around. They give it to women. They give it to children, and they provide for others. However, the same is not true of women. When women get the same resources, they don't think, now that I'm in possession of a good fortune, I must be in want of a husband. They overwhelmingly say, I don't need a man. I'm not going to pay a grown man's bills. That's a boy, not a man. I'm going to take care of me. What the data reveal is that women don't share. They compete with men in the professional marketplace for the same money, and when they get it, they keep it to themselves. And what could possibly corroborate the observation that women use men for resources better than the fact that women have less interest in men when they have their own resources? Like, you can't make this shit up. Now, you might cavil that the research findings are about children, not men, but this is somewhat specious, right? Like, where do you think kids come from? But that's only the most obvious response. We're going to have to go a little deeper and a little darker, because it turns out women aren't always full of sugar and spice and everything nice. Now,
I think that's a hard realization for a lot of us. Nameless says, children are the only exception to that rule, and only up to a certain point. Well, Nameless, also it's a very nuanced thing, because there are ladies who will spend their money on men. Obviously it depends on her level of interest and love for that guy. It depends on what stage they are in their relationship, and what the circumstances are for their relationship. But yeah, quite a few are disgusted, or they get the ick. They get the ick at the prospect of having to pay for a man, or if they make more money than a man. Okay, I was talking. I'll share this here. I don't think it matters. A boomer cousin on my dad's side, asked me about 2 months ago, "Do you mind? Are you okay being with someone who makes more than you?" And I think that was the wrong question. I think the right question was the opposite. With someone who makes more than me, would she be okay being with me? Anyhow, we're almost at the end. Let's finish this up.
Well, there have been many, many fantastic, loving, devoted mothers in the world, mothers who want to be mothers, who love and care for their children, who consider it the greatest thing they've ever done with their lives. There have also been many women, both throughout history and today, who use children to secure resources from men. So it's not just that men provide resources to women, it's that children provide resources to women through men. Don't believe me? Do you know anyone who accidentally got pregnant in order to get a man to marry her? Do you know anyone who, in a struggling and dysfunctional relationship, decided to have children in order to save the marriage?
That's an interesting question. We hear that a lot. So-and-so was an accident. I was an accident. We had an accident. But then once that accident happens, the decision still has to be made to carry that baby to term. So that's an interesting question. Accident. That's an interesting term, accident.
And did you know that child support has absolutely nothing to do with what a child needs in order to have a healthy and comfortable lifestyle, and absolutely everything to do with the amount of available resources that can be extracted from the man in question? Look, women want resources. They always have, and they always will. They are more about the bag than the finance bros they like to mock. And historically, women have used men and children to get those resources. So are we really so surprised to learn that when we just give women the resources directly, they choose to dispense with the men and the children? Like, that is an economically rational decision.
So that's an interesting argument right there, that ultimately it's the resources, and the children, men and children, are a means to an end in terms of the resources. I've had to think about that, and I will continue thinking about that, because obviously, we know the state needs children, but also isn't it also important to have somebody take care of you when you get older and elderly? Isn't that also one of the selling points for having a quote unquote legacy? But to his point, are women for the most part strictly concerned about getting the bag? What say you in the audience, in viewer land?
Women have cut out the middlemen, which has provided them with better operational margins. Now, the researchers of the study interpreted these results by basically arguing that raising women's income was a kind of golden handcuff. That is, now that they were making more, the opportunity cost to leave the workforce to have children was just too great, considering that women are still disproportionately responsible for childcare. And of course, apologists will argue that this is true, not because of the biological realities involved, but because of residual sexism and misogyny. However, that's what's so great about this study. Denmark is like literally the most sexually egalitarian society in the entire world. And apparently it's still sexist. Like, it never ends. It really doesn't. Now, there's probably some truth to that explanation. Like, golden handcuffs are a thing, but it largely misses the point. Like, that opportunity cost is still there when the woman makes less money, and it would be tough to argue that childcare becomes more difficult the more resources you have at your disposal. So I'm not really buying it. I think the researchers offered this interpretation because a fantastic study that presented the more honest and obvious, but less acceptable interpretation would not have gotten published. And that interpretation is simple. When you give men money, they share it with women and children. And when you give women money, they keep it for themselves.
He just said something really, really interesting there. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with publishing scientific literature, the papers have to go through peer review. And so the people publishing the actual paper for dispersal to the masses, they have to green light it. So according to what Dr. Taraban just said, the authors had to write this up in such a way that it would be accepted. So if they said it the way he's saying it, it might have gotten knocked back. Okay, because it matters what you say today, and it matters how you say it. All right, we're just about at the end.
And why wouldn't this be the case? Women have been on the receiving end of men's selected protection provision for millennia. And when they are suddenly in the position to protect and provide themselves, they don't do it. They don't do it. Probably because there is absolutely no culture to support that behavior in women. And it has like never been selected for by men in the history of the human race. So if we want to address the population collapse in a relative reality-based way, this paper offers a practical suggestion. Give him the money. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So what do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. And please send this episode to someone who you think might benefit from its message, because it's word of mouth referrals like this that really help to make the channel grow. Other value props? Anyone looking to join my free weekly newsletter, for which I write original content, or book a paid one-on-one consultation with yours truly, can find out more information on my website. There's also my book, The Value of Others, in which I explore the economic model of relationships, and my novel, Starry Night, where I examine the final weeks in the life of painter Vincent van Gogh. Also, most importantly, there's my private member community, the Captain's Quarters. Having trouble applying this general theory and my teachings to your unique situation? That's what the community is for. I host bi-monthly live group consultation calls with people all over the planet where we bring all of this teaching to your specific circumstances.
I think I'll stop right there. I'm a self-published author myself, so I understand the importance of pumping your stuff. So thank you to Dr. Taraban. For creating that offering. I do have my copy of The Value of Others. This is for both genders. This is not a misogynistic book for those who would accuse me or accuse him of such things. And that was a discussion on reproductive biology and resources. But the discussion is not over. Nameless Protagonist, I am dropping the link right now to get your two sets, or $100. Guys, the paper, if you want to read the paper yourself, I went and pulled the paper. That's why I was able to show you that figure that he cited. There are several figures in that paper, but the paper is here. You'll have to. I pulled down the PDF. You might be able to read the HTML version, but I pulled down the PDF for myself. Yeah, Dameless says, can I give him 3 minutes? Yeah. So what did you guys think about that? I think that's very, very telling. So remember, I'm centering this talk on reproductive biology. Okay. And so, from a biomolecular physiological standpoint, sperm, egg, fetus, and then you get an adult, a child, which grows into an adult X amount of months later. And I'm sure for birds and squirrels and alligators and wolves and hyenas, lions, tigers, bears, it's that simple. But humans have culture. Humans have we have culture. We have religion, we have politics, we have college degrees, we have jobs. So for humans, there are all these other variables. Now we have social movements. Okay, now we have multiple genders. So there's a whole host of things that we are superimposing on our biology. Okay, and we have cities, we have technologies, okay, all of which are in certain ways working around and circumventing our biology, even though our biology still has a way of piercing through everything and asserting itself. But I think what we're seeing right now, and I think part of what Nameless is going to say when he comes up, is that we are overlaying all of these things onto our biology as humans, that bears and tigers and lions and birds and foxes and dolphins and sharks, they don't have all of this. They're not arguing about gender. They're not arguing about who's going to get to lead. They're not arguing about whether or not the women can. They're not arguing about whether women were put here to be baby makers. Okay, they're not doing that. So there are advantages to being humans, and then there are, as we're experiencing now, there are disadvantages to being humans. Do you guys have any more comments while the Nameless prepares to come and give us the benediction? Shout out to Mr. Z. Do you guys have any more thoughts or comments? If anyone wants to donate to the channel, my information is there in the ticker. Do you guys have you guys pondered these same things? Have you guys seen the same thing in terms of resources and college degrees and what to do with our resources once you earn them? Have you guys experienced this exact same thing? And if you guys haven't, that's okay too. Okay, looks like Nameless is making some tea. But this is the birth rate crisis. This is spilling out into the mainstream now. A month ago, I had to help my dad with his hip replacement surgery, and things came up, and I told him Okay, yeah, Dad, there's a birth rate crisis going on, because my family laments the fact that me and my brother don't have children. And I said, yeah, Dad, there's a birth rate crisis going on. And he looked at me surprised, like, oh, there is. I think he was military, and I think that for the quote unquote dominant society, there were alarm bells going off back in the 90s about them not producing enough boys, their population not reproducing. But I think that for the descendants of slaves, I'll call us that, the descendants of slaves, I think that there was the thought that, okay, well, we're still fine. They might not be reproducing, but we're still fine. We'll still be here. That's not necessarily the case, Mr. and Mrs. Black Baby Boomer. That's not necessarily the case. And you all didn't see some of this coming yourselves. But how can you see it if the news outlets you're watching, if they're not talking about it? If you're not on social media, if you're not out in the streets at happy hour, at brunches, if you're not out in the world today, how would you know? How could you know? All right, our guest of honor is here. Everybody, let's welcome up the nameless protagonist. Nameless.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. To the chat and the instructor on the panel. Os. Okay, there's a lot to say on this. Real quick, am I fading in and out with this because there's some additional software that Streamlabs or StreamYard likes to use that throttles the sound? So I just want to make sure I'm having a continuous sort of flow that you can hear, or if it's kind of being cutting in and out in a way.
No, you sound perfect right now.
Excellent. His video is a complete vindication of everything we've been talking about. And I find it interesting because lately I've been extremely quiet, but I think that I've been putting together so many papers. I've got so much work, Dr. Dunbar. It's not even funny. I got to start getting some of this stuff out because as soon as I make these papers, more data comes out that not only corroborates it, but it opens up a whole new field of perspective to do research in that I just never considered or just wasn't really there because it was too theoretical. Now, most of these things are happening in real time. Their ability to gather data is so much better now. And it's almost as if, you know how when you get a new pair of glasses and you live life not looking at the leaves in the tree. You just see the tree and you recognize it. But when you put glasses on it, then you can start actually seeing the leaves. The phenomenon of the forest becomes so different that it gives you whole new ways of recognizing and not just calibrating, but experiencing things. New ways you can articulate and describe phenomenon that now have the resolution that's high enough to place it somewhere. I want to introduce you to a concept, Dr. Dunbar, and write this down because it's going to be real easy for you. And this is going to relate to the Mouse Utopia experiment. It's called the Dunbar number. The Dunbar number. And what's interesting about it is one of the main arguments they held against Dr. John Calhoun in his work, Death Squared, was that unlike the rodents in the various universes in utopia that were created in his experiment, that human beings have the agency to move around. They aren't locked into a general location, and they're able to create interventions for themselves, which for the most part is absolutely true, in particular, and especially for the industrial first world. The thing they didn't really count on and understand is that when you get into the psychology behind what is emerging from this fourth industrial technology, starting with having cell phones in your hand with broadband internet and the ability to communicate with people all over the world, There are few things that come into play once you introduce that. And I said it in the intro that you voiced me from the last conversation we had in the video about how you have these emergent consequences that occur because human beings have adapted to evolve with each other, not independently. And there are things that we outsource to each other to where we can cope with an environment in emergent contexts, which is why we're social creatures, why we have mirror neurons. It's why we have eyebrows even. It's why we value communication and communication under the guise of who's deserving of empathy so that you can form in groups and out groups. Tying this back in. When you understand that having access and connection all this time plays a role on your neurological system because the body keeps score, your autonomic nervous system treats any experience, virtual or real, to at least a 80% match, meaning what you experience virtually as a biochemical response in your autonomic nervous system. The chemicals in your brain that respond to cortisol, that engage in stress hormone, are no different than experiencing it in person. The difference is less than 20%. When we get into the actual Dunbar number, and that number for most people is 150, we get into a situation where your ability to have meaningful relationships vicariously through parasocial relationships creates a scenario where you not only tax that 150 number, you're already in cortisol overload by the sheer amount of engagement you get from your reactions just from being on social media and on your phone and in general. And what this is doing is it's emulating the same stress environment that they were claiming the Dr. John Calhoun's work wouldn't impact with human beings. In other words, one of the unintentional consequences of everyone being connected and having parasocial experiences with one another through technology is that it is emulating being in a cramped Universe 25 environment, even if you've got space to go everywhere. The biochemical response going on internally is as if you are in a crowded room, which explains all of these different sources of adaptations and needs for distraction. When you start looking at all of these emergent cognitive problems that have started to occur, not just in individuals that grew up with this, but those that are experiencing it now out the womb. So 1-year-olds that can navigate an iPad but actually don't know how to speak. These are things that are happening where people are beginning to hyper adjust to the technology and to the state and not each other, which is exacerbating that outcome even more so. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's not so much, and I'm digressing, I'm gonna hand it back to you, where it's not so much that the technology is getting so advanced that it can emulate humans. There's a regression factor occurring where humans are starting to behave more like the technology.
Okay. Wow. Casual Economist says, does Nameless have a YouTube channel?
Yes, you can just click on my name and it should take you right there.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get a link.
Yeah, you're wrenched. So the Dunbar number, so that's a cortisol measurement?
No, it's a measurement of the number of meaningful relationships most human beings are capable of having. And that number was derived by observing humanity in antiquity and up to the present moment, especially before the Industrial Revolution, where they would notice an effect all over the world where groups of people wouldn't aggregate greater than 150. And once that started to happen, you started finding schisms. It's as if that's the natural number that you reach where human beings can operate in an optimal capacity and still get their daily needs met for safety and basically the whole Maslow's pyramid squared away, at least for the first and second levels. So as those numbers increase, you started to find that humanity would branch off and split off. And so human beings began to hyper optimize for this general number, because if you're going to survive in these pockets of 150, your neurology, everything else around you, your ability to thrive and survive would be optimized to that number in a general sense. And if we consider how long human beings have been around versus how long this technology has been around and the lack of time we've had to actually adjust to this, you can see how that number is being violently interrupted and how it happened very, very aggressively.
Okay, so we're only, in other words, we're only biologically, we're only evolved or optimized to have those 150 interactions, and now with the social media, you know, we're encountering thousands and millions of people. That's creating side effects.
Yes, it's where you get the whole parasocial phenomenon that goes on. And this wouldn't be a big of a deal if it wasn't for the fact that, again, these virtual experiences are still creating biological responses in human beings as if it actually occurred. And so if our bodies are not really giving a realistic distinction between real and false, and I don't mean in the prefrontal cortex where people are having delusions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'll use a jump scare phenomenon that used to be popular back in the day. Just because your brain can rationalize that what's in the screen isn't real doesn't mean when you had that jump scare that that didn't cost electricity, that that didn't create a hormonal response, and that that hormonal imprint wouldn't have existed had that phenomenon not been there. But now there's a record of that phenomenon that your body now needs to resolve. This is happening at so many different levels and scales to the point where there's a passive overstimulation that's occurring that we're constantly adapting to, which I think is adding to the ambient stress and ambient cortisol levels most people experience in a baseline. And you don't notice this stuff until you have these detox sessions where you completely disconnect and unplug from these things and go to natural environments that are just that don't have these things. You know, it's kind of like the noise pollution phenomenon or light pollution phenomenon.
So society-wide, people are experiencing elevated cortisol. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, across the board, you can see that. I mean, it's just it's so baseline now that I don't even think it's measured for.
Okay, and this was influenced by the all of the connections and the social media and all the interactions.
Yeah, the sheer volume of information being processed now. This is just a natural byproduct. And obviously, and again, I like that word optimized because, again, that's the word I would use to describe that because there are obviously exceptions. I mean, there's some people who they can manage that very well and thrive irregardless of those situations. But when we talk about humanity and getting into the numbers in the billions that are in the industrial first world, these issues become emergent. And typically speaking, you need to come up with a response to that. And stress management, stress relief, all of these things, if you don't address it, it plays out in the body in the form of inflammation. You've got issues like high blood pressure that shows up, all these non-communicatable diseases. When you break them down to their initial components, you start finding that stress is all these underlying factors that really precursor these things. And then you start comparing that to the the third world or the global south. And you'll notice that these things fall off and more of their problems tend to be more so from a lack of infrastructure rather than because of it. So I'm bringing this up because it directly relates to how we're getting these emergent behavioral sync-like behaviors, even though we don't have the quote space issue, end quote, that the mouse utopia experiments were characterized by. It doesn't matter so much to the nervous system if you're enclosed or experiencing something physically. So long as the nervous system is convinced something has to be processed and is real, it's then the executive job of the prefrontal cortex to flip that off switch. And a neurological example I always use of this, and I did this on your show last time, is if you take any of your hands, you can take your left hand, look at it in front of your face and attempt to close your fist and then attempt to only close or curl your pinky. You're going to notice that your ring finger and your pinky are going to fight that really, really hard. Like it's almost impossible to just do that for most people. To just curl to just curl that pinky there. And if you feel a signal trying to counter against that, it's because the neurological signal for making a fist is much stronger and older than a neurological signal to only move the pinky. In fact, it doesn't exist. It's actually two separate signals. It's a signal that says close the fist and then another signal that says open the other fingers. That's how our neurology optimizes or fails to optimize or is poorly optimized to address these things. So when we experience phenomenon, it goes through very similar channels where we experience the full thing and then the prefrontal cortex goes, oh, nah, that was fake. You can disregard that. And so you experience it to a degree and then it's mitigated through logic. This is why the emotional centers in the brain are so much stronger when it comes to processing and decision making. I'm digressing, but I'm showing the line of effect and how this becomes cumulative in its nature.
Okay. Well, Nameless, as you were saying that, I was thinking, so there's perceiving digitally what's real and what's not. But I was also thinking that a lot of the stuff also follows us offline too.
Yep.
In terms of stress, in terms of all this stuff, could ruin your professional career, could ruin your real world relationships. If you have beefs online with people, people digging your stuff up years later. Yeah, I could see this kind of being additive on top of the having too many connections. Going back to Taraban's video, have you pondered this before? Have you thought about this before? The difference in the perception of resources, the handling of resources between the genders, what those resources should be used for?
Not only did I put this into the political Mandalorianism framework as an appendix. In fact, it's the second appendix.
Okay.
I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick. Should actually be on the site. Let me go to the actual video I did on it. Political Mandalorianism should be in. Yep. Linked right here. And hopefully it's still up. It is. So I'm going to link. Let me copy that. I'm going to link it in the chat for everybody.
Okay.
Paste. And you guys can look at it along with me. I'm going to Political Mandalorianism. It's going to be under not the axiom, but Appendix 2, Modality of Civilizations. And I'll just read it because it's probably best. I just go ahead and read it. You can see verbatim and you can compare to what the doctor was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so right here under Modality of Civilizations in Appendix 2. For the functional majority of human society, men are held to the reasonable expectation for family, and likewise, women are held to the reasonable expectation for safety. This describes a fundamental modality of human societies across history and cultures. It highlights the reciprocal expectations placed on men and women, forming the foundational social contract. 2b. For the functional majority of human cultures, initiations and motivations orbit around men being prepared to embody and demonstrate safety. Likewise, women are prepared to embody and demonstrate family. This delves into the cultural and psychological dimensions of the modality. It suggests that core male initiations and motivations are often linked to demonstrating the capacity to provide safety, while the core female initiations and motivations are often linked to embodying and nurturing family. 2c. For the known majority of human history, phases of civilization can be marked by technological modalities introduced into this interplay of safety for family and family for safety, initially as a disruption and manifesting with time as an adaptation by way of the culture. This introduces the dynamic element of technological change. It argues that major shifts in civilization are often marked by new technologies that disrupt the established, quote, safety for family / family for safety modality. And last, 2D, the greater the jump in technology, the smaller the interval of social or socio-cultural disruption to the society, which introduces entropy to the system, which may lead to destabilization. This highlights the accelerating pace of technological change and its potential to destabilize societies. Larger technological leaps lead to shorter periods for cultural adaptation, increasing the risk of societal entropy and breakdown if adaptation fails to keep pace. I think this is exactly what we've been talking about.
Okay. Okay. This is
Political Mandalorianism.
okay.
I call it the Mujinkin. It's an intellectual social software I've been working on, man. One of the things I've done, you can see I did that last year. I updated it last year. So it's been up for a while. But no, it's so important. And the Mouse Utopia conversation is a big reason why I put that in there. And I needed to find a way of codifying it so that it can be not only extrapolated, but recognized as a general default, because it is essentially demonized to even bring this topic up for the most part, because it's seen as though everyone's the same, everything's equal. And there's kind of like this scientific denialism that's been going on as it relates to sex, gender, and more critically social roles that are related to it. And as we get the dual invasion on men's social role from the state and technology, it's just been made and normalized that men are supposed to be in this diminutive state that continually gets divided into, to the point where now we're no longer able to maintain valence with the culture. Men are at, it's a paradox, because we're able to get our base needs met, but we can adjust to that, whereas women simply just, they're not calibrated to do that. They can't look at the idea of adjusting to a baseline. There's this expectation of infinite scale that's inherent to them. So they don't, and I get into this in another theory I call the fourth world theory. I think this is because men have had to be the ones to adopt the technology first. So because of that, they had to adapt to the technology, and then they had to compete against other men who were using it. Otherwise, their civilization goes bye-bye. As a result, the women have never had to adapt to the technology. They've only had to adapt to the men. So they get to stay closer to their natural state, which is why Briffeld's law, which originally intended to apply to just animals, seems so applicable when we talk about women, because I don't think women have been as impacted by the technology as a survival imperative the same way men have. So I get this phrase, and you got it after that. I say men have been calibrated to become dogs, whereas women have been allowed to stay as wolves.
Okay, Nameless, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that latter point, and then I'll have to wrap up shortly. Okay, could you say that one more time? You said you don't think women have been as adversely affected by the technology?
Correct. I think men as a paradigm of life and death. So we'll take the society. If there's a technological advance that occurs, it isn't women that have to adjust to that. It's the men of the society that have to adjust to that, because men of other societies have done so. So when men have the technology, they're the ones that apply energy direction. So if a group of men who have an advantage technologically interfaces with a group of men who haven't adopted that, that society generally is either taken over or it's done. And when we look at the way these takeovers occur, who are the ones that are destroyed? The men below the age, above the age of 12. And what gets adopted and brought in are the women and the children.
Oh, as you were saying that, I was thinking about the gun.
That's one immediate illustration, but you can even get into something like agricultural modalities, where a population that can feed itself easier than another, it results in the same sort of issues. So you can just look at the introduction of iron versus people who were using bronze. This is such a recurring pattern that to not calculate this, to me, is irresponsible or intellectually dishonest or nearsighted, because overwhelmingly men have had to adapt to the technological changes. The further back you go, the more time that's being allotted for a culture to find ways of adopting and expressing it, and then eventually it influences everyone. So it could be accurate, or more accurate, to say that there is an order of operations where the men adapt first, and the order of operations for women is for the women to adapt to the men. That's why when we get into the Industrial Revolution, where now we get the creation of this idea of the state, and then technology is able to gain a monopoly over violence, what's left for men that women wouldn't technically have access to, either directly or through other men? We're back to the women's biological evolution, not biological, sociological adaptation is less so on the technology itself and the men around them, which is why when the state becomes the overall provider, I would make the argument that women are more responsive to the state than most men at this point. As a result of that, when you look at the industrial first world, which matches everything Dr. Calhoun was talking about in the Mouse Utopia experiments, when you look at the behavior of the women there, one of the first things to go out the window was the maternal instinct, etc. It may not be the same, but it rhymes so well that there's an underlying mechanism that seems to be in place there.
Okay. These discussions, once you open up one door, it opens up 10 more. So just as you're saying that, I was thinking about the women now complaining about there not being enough suitable mates, but the men have said, okay, well, this entire situation has become untenable, and we can keep ourselves occupied with gaming and YouTubing and other things. Okay, we'll have to continue.
That is definitely leading somewhere, and it's not a coincidence. It really
it's not
isn't.
a coincidence.
No.
Okay, Nameless, thank you for coming up. We'll have to rendezvous again sometime soon.
Yeah, man, just hit me up on my email, man. And like I said in the chat earlier, I also want to get into that conversation on my macronutrition, because part of coming to understand these unintended consequences of all of the stress, etc., led me to doing all this research on the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system in general, and studying mitochondria, fat, ATP cycle, all of that. I have a lot of interesting things that I've tripped over and found interesting, and a lot of things that would be very relevant to our demographic in particular, especially if you're over the age of 30. It's some pretty useful information. Paradigm shifting information. Part of these things we knew already. A lot of it is now finally being verified because we now have the ability to show the receipts. So if you're interested in that also one day, Dr. Dunbar, I'd love to have you on a panel so we could get, a biochemical, someone that's in that particular field to really give some insight as to what's happening with some of these processes and sort of either validate or contend some of these points, because I think it'd be useful.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Let me think about that, and I will be in touch, certainly.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for having me up, fam.
Thank you for being in the chat and commenting. All right, everybody. Casual Economist. Well, to answer your question, he does have a channel. He says, "Sheesh, this stream makes me want to go back and get a PhD." Hey, the bar, when Nameless comes in, the bar gets lifted. Okay. And he says, this needs to be a longer stream. Yeah, I agree. Because it was, with just some of the ideas he was giving us, I was kind of going into those other doors, but I have some other things to do today. So thank you, Nameless. Guys, I'm going to wrap up. So I just wanted to give some commentary on Dr. Orion Taraban's latest video. This is gender relations, the birth rate crisis, what's going to happen with humanity. I think people at much higher levels than us, they're trying to sound the alarm bells, and they are worried about this now. And they were probably worried before, but now they're saying it openly. Another name you're going to hear, I think the Heartland Institute, and then some of the other podcast channels, they're reflecting. I did content on Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb. His concern back in the 70s, his and others, was that there would be too many human beings and that we would eventually overwhelm the earth and suck it dry. So he helped fuel the concern for overpopulation, which probably has fed into a lot of the agendas that we've been hit with over the last 10 to 20 years. So that's a name you're going to see coming up in terms of he was wrong, and he and others have misled us. So everybody, with that, if you're a part of the replay gang, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you to everyone who watched who watched the show live and hung out in the chat. Tony, Cynical Optimist, and whoever else came in. I won't be doing a show next weekend. I will be on travel, and I will not be doing a show. If you haven't, please consider picking up a copy of my book, The Engineers, A Western New York Basketball Story. It looks like it's just about basketball, but it's also about some of the same things Dr. Tiasan Johnson talks about. It's about being a young Black boy, a young Black man. It's about changing environments. And it's also about getting things out of the mud. It's about male mentors, the importance of male mentors and not having them, okay, and the results of everything. So for my YouTube subs and viewers, if you want a signed copy, I'll charge $27 for the paperback, $27 for the hardcover, and $22 for the paperback. You can use one of those methods in the ticker. Just make sure you send me your mailing address the way that Money Motion did. You can also go to my online store. Reading is important, guys. Just like Theo Waff said a week and a half ago. Read. That's critical for cloud engineering. And I think also reading is critical for remembering where we came from and remembering how not to completely lose our way the way that we are now. You can also go to my online store, use the coupon code GOBLUE, and that will take $5 off of one of the list prices. So everybody, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. Again, if you're watching on the replay gang, please consider leaving a comment if you were so moved from today's offering. So with that, everybody, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I might cover this again on my original channel from a broad societal perspective. We'll see. But enjoy the rest of your weekend. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Question everything. Question the mainstream media. Do your own research. Ask questions. And a lot of what you need to know is right here on YouTube. It's not on MS Now. It's not on CNN. It's right here on YouTube. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.